and welcome to this week's edition of the Retirement Compass, the show that helps you successfully navigate to and through your retirement. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio are two financial advisors from Stonebridge Wealth Systems. We have the co-founder, Tim Kulhanek, and partner, Jeremy Gove. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to kick off this episode by talking about why your 401k is not just an IRA at work. The reality is that millions of Americans who are using these retirement tools to save for their retirement think that these two accounts are the same thing. But the reality is the rules are very different, and if you don't understand those differences, it can cost you a lot in the form of unnecessary taxes, penalties, and missed opportunities. So we're going to clarify all of that for you today. Tim, Jeremy, so good to be here with both of you. How are you this week?
Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you. And Jeremy, how are you?
Doing very good, thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to have this conversation with you. And I know part of the reason is because you're having these kinds of conversations in your office when folks are coming in to meet with you. So Tim, let me just ask, how often do you find that folks are under this impression that their 401k and their IRA are, they think they're basically the same thing?
Yeah, honestly, all the time. And I love the way you frame this. They believe that their 401k is an IRA at work. But we're going to go through a few different slides to help really drive home the point today that they simply are not. In fact, the IRS, they treat these things like two completely different worlds. They've got similarities on the surface, but underneath those the surface and those similarities, you've got different contribution limits, different withdrawal rules, different inheritance rules. And so our goal today is to go through, if we have time, probably the 10 biggest differences between IRAs and 401ks. So ideally, by the end of the show today, you're going to understand why many clients tell us that they finally found what they consider peace once they actually transitioned from the 401k world to the IRA world.
Yes, because there are some key differences. So Jeremy, let's start with the most basic thing that folks often want to know about and compare, which is how much money you can put into these types of retirement accounts. So what does that look like for the year 2026?
Yeah, so that's where a 401k really shines when you compare it to an IRA or a Roth IRA. We have a slide for you where we can pull that up about the contribution limits for 2026. So an IRA will show you, an IRA you can put in $7,500 this year if you're under the age of 50. If you're over the age of 50, you get an additional catch-up contribution. I should say 50 or older, you get a catch-up contribution of $1,100, so a total of $8,600 for the IRA. But the 401k is a little different. You have base deferral for 2026 is $24,500. And then you can add an $8,000 catch-up if you're 50 or older. There's an additional wrinkle now that has been added. And so there's a catch-up contribution if you're 60, 61, 62, or 63. And that super catch-up is $11,250. And that takes place of the catch-up contribution if you're 50 or older. So when you start laying that all together, the bottom line is for 2026, the contribution limit could be as high as $72,000 when you combine your contributions and your employer's contributions as well. So it's when you compare that to $8,600 if you're 50 or older, that's a huge difference. So during the saving phase, a 401k definitely outshines the rest. But the thing that most people miss is that there are limits on how much you can take out. And so when you think of a retirement account or the 401k, the 401k is built to save money, but when you retire, it turns that fortress that we call, savings fortress, that turns it into almost like a prison. Makes it more challenging to get money out of that.
And I know we're going to get into this later too, but the majority of folks who have a 401k, it's a traditional 401k, which means it's been tax deferred, which is going to create tax implications as well. So you're going to want to stay tuned because we're going to get into that throughout today's show. But Tim, I would love for you to be able to share a real client example with our viewers of what we're talking about, just to continue to set the stage for the rest of today's episode. Someone who came in thinking that everything was fine, right? They've got their 401k, but then they realized it was actually costing them more than they realized. So can you share that story?
These things happen all the time. So you guys know this. I am a member of Ed Slott's Master Elite IRA Advisor Group. And so I go to meetings on a regular basis, and we we do coursework, right? We drill, we train to make sure that we're honing our skills when it comes to understanding how these rules work. And the stories you hear are shocking, in a word. And one of the cases we talked about, so this is a real client example. It wasn't one I experienced in my office, but this was a few years ago. And it was, I went to tax court. It was McGovern versus the commissioner. It was back in 2003. McGovern was a full-time law student at Villanova University, College of Law. And so really smart guy, right? He was studying to get his law degree, and he needed $12,880 for tuition, okay? So he pulled it from, he had worked for the government. So he had what's called the Thrift Savings Plan, or TSP. It's the government's version, basically, of a 401k. He knew that there was exceptions to the rule of, or the early withdrawal penalty, which is 10%. And he knew one of those was for higher education. The problem is he didn't really do his homework. So like, the way that Ed Slott's team framed it was budding lawyer blows his first case, his own, right? What happened is he filed his taxes, he reported the income, but he intentionally didn't pay the 10% penalty, figuring that the education expense would be
suffice, right?
Yeah, the exception would work. IRS disagreed. They said that he owed $1,288 in penalties. This is exactly why we're doing this show, is this is a smart person. This isn't someone, like you would think that, okay, this is somebody who's in this field of finance and a professional, white collar, studying to be an attorney, and yet it still happened to him. And here's where it gets interesting. He decided to represent himself in tax court. His argument was, Judge, the education expense should apply here under the doctrine of substance over form. Yes, I took it from my TSP, but I could have rolled, theoretically, I could have rolled it to an IRA first and then taken it out. It was the same money, the same purpose. Why should the IRS care about the technical route in which I got there? Well, they said, Mr. McGovern, you are free to organize your affairs as you choose, but once you make that choice, you must accept the tax consequences that go along with it. Whether you contemplated them or not, you cannot enjoy the benefit of some other route you might have chosen but did not.
Ouch.
He lost $1,200 down the drain, all because he didn't understand the rules. So like what I'd say to folks at home, if you're sitting at home and you're thinking, wow, I got 401ks spread out from multiple different employers that I worked for in the past, I haven't consolidated those, I'm not sure how the rules work on if I needed to access that money. It's great to have a savings fortress. You just never want it to turn into a savings prison that you can't get your money out of, like Jeremy shared. The point of Stonebridge is for us to be able to be your guide, to help you navigate these different tax rules and how they actually work and apply them to your unique financial situation. We're excited to do that when you give us a call at the number at the bottom of the screen, and we'll see you in our office real soon.
Wonderful. Tim, Jeremy, thank you so much. I know we've got a lot of valuable information. You said 10 different things we want to talk about, differences, right?
Yep,
so
right.
but that set the stage very well. We encourage you to hang with us. But if this is resonating with you, if you would like to get a handle on what type of retirement accounts you hold, what the differences are, so that you don't fall into some of these same traps and make some of these same mistakes, we encourage you to reach out to Tim and Jeremy and the team of Stonebridge Wealth Systems for your very own complimentary written financial review. 866-256-7778 is the number to call to schedule yours. Stay with us. When we come back, we're going to be talking about a lot of the restrictions with 401ks that folks don't realize, which could cost you in big ways. So stay with us to find out what those are right after this.
Our team is very unique, so we all have different gifts. When you put it all together, it fits well.
Jeremy is definitely our most seasoned and fastest growing advisor we have. He's discerning, so he understands the way we want to do things at Stonebridge, to focus on the client and solving their problems, and that's really what he's passionate about.
I know Tim spends a lot of time making sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed for his clients. And he's not just satisfied knowing the 30,000-foot view, he wants to get down in the weeds and know exactly how it works.
The things that you buy, the stocks, the bonds, the mutual funds, that really isn't that important to the client. What's important to the client is, what does this mean for me? And at the end of the day, what it means is they can sit back and listen to the music. You know that you've got a team, not just one person, but an entire team behind you that's taking care of those things, so you can focus on what's important.
Welcome back to the Retirement Compass. I'm Kristen Oakley here with both Tim and Jeremy from Stonebridge Wealth Systems, and we're so glad you're spending this time with us today. If you are just joining us, we laid out in the first segment the key differences between a 401k and an IRA. They are not the same thing. They are similar, but they behave very differently. And without understanding all the rules, that can create some serious consequences and cost you real money. So that's what we want to talk about now, are some of these restrictions. So Tim, the first place that we need to address, the first thing, is that folks often within a 401k are limited in what they can actually invest in. Can you explain that?
You think about it this way. If you think of the observable diameter or radius, let's go with the radius of the universe. I think it's like 46 billion light years is how, so in other words, close to 92 billion light years is the diameter we can observe of the entire universe. If I had a gun and I shot a bullet that traveled at the speed of light, it could go around the universe like 7.5 times in 1 second. Wow, it's big. The difference between an IRA and a 401k, in an IRA, you have that universe, okay? And you can see that on your slide right now on the right-hand side. Everything is unlocked to you: individual stocks, ETFs, bonds, mutual funds, structured notes, real estate, CDs, treasuries, annuities. You pick the strategy that fits you. The difference with a 401k is you're limited, okay? There's a fund lineup. A lot of companies have gone to basically a minimize our liability type of approach to their fund lineups in the 401k, and they say, hey, look, you're gonna put you in this one size fits most. We're gonna ask you one question: what's your age? And that's the fund you're gonna go into. It doesn't mean it's the right thing for you. They offer the same exact plan to you, the retiree or retirement age person, as they do the 21-year-old that's fresh out of college that they just hired. There's no customization, there's no flexibility, optionality. It's you take what you get, right? That is the thing we want to stress here, is how important is flexibility to you? To me, it's very important, right? Because I want to make sure that this is customized to my unique financial situation. An IRA can do that, the 401k cannot.
Right. You know, you mentioned some interesting languaging earlier, Jeremy. You were talking about how a 401k often can be a fortress when you're saving, but that it can then turn into a prison. So we have these cage bars that we're talking about, right? And the next restriction is how it's different to actually get your money out of the 401k versus the IRA. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can. So we have another slide on this. So let's run through the differences, just looking at them side by side. So the 401k is on the left and the IRA is on the right. And so when you look at that, so how, if I'm withdrawing money while I'm still employed, I can use a loan if I want to pull money out of my 401k, but if I have money in an IRA, I can just access it, right? And so that's that comparison. So while I'm still employed, if I qualify for a hardship at work, I could, or a hardship, financial hardship, I could, well, typically I'm going to have to fill out something for that 401k to be able to identify why I'm taking this money
Correct.
out, right?
You have to prove it's a hardship.
Yeah, to get it approved.
Yeah.
And so that's often required. But with an IRA, you don't have to do that. So you don't have, there's never a hardship requirement. You know, you can make that decision. So then the next thing is the speed to get a check. That's that third line, speed to receive funds. From a 401k, that can take days or potentially weeks. And then if it's an IRA, depending on what companies you're working with, you can get those quickly. It would be days. It wouldn't be weeks typically. And so then on the mandatory with federal withholding, this is probably one of the key areas that you would want to consider about leaving money in a 401k versus taking it out. So the mandatory withholding, like we talked about, is 20% off the top. And if you have an IRA, you get to choose. You don't have to have taxes withheld, because in every situation, taxes look a little differently, right? So depending on what other income I might have, I may not have to pay tax on that. So I'd rather have the ability to make that decision. The other thing that's important to talk about, and this is the last line on that slide, is the 60-day rollover. So I can roll over money from a 401k into an IRA, or from a 401k to a 401k, but it's limited. I have a few options on how I can do that. But if I'm rolling money to an IRA, I can do that once every 12 months. So what a 60-day rollover equates to is money that's sent to me, and then I'm writing that check back into the into the IRA, and that's something that you definitely want to document closely.
Yes.
Especially if that's, you want to document the check that you got and then the check that you wrote back to make sure that there is no tax consequences.
And make sure you do it within the window of time and not delay, because that could be very serious.
Or just don't do it.
Correct.
Yeah, we try to avoid doing that if it's at all possible.
No, for sure. But I do want you to go back, if you would, and touch on the whole mandatory 20% withholding. So let's put this in monetary terms. What does that mean if someone watching needs to, say, withdraw $100,000 from one of these accounts?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And we have a slide to kind of talk about that. So if I need to take $100,000 out of my 401k, and I ask them to send the money to me, they're going to send me $80,000. That's the money that's actually going to show up in my bank account, because they're going to automatically withhold 20%, and they're going to send that to the IRS in the form of taxes.
Yep.
So what if I needed that $100,000, to pay a bill or to do something with? I'm going to have to come up with that $20,000 from somewhere else. So
or take a lot more money out.
Or take more money out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
So if I need, exactly. So you might have to take 130 or 140,000 to get your 100,000 that you actually needed. So, so that's taking money from your 401k. If you're taking it from an IRA, that's a little bit different, because you're just taking that 100,000. If I don't want to have any taxes withheld, I don't have to have taxes withheld, so I can get $100,000 out.
You'll have to pay the tax bill for your taxes
I'll have to
next
pay
year,
the
right?
taxes. Yeah, and again, so in this, this discussion, we're not talking about the actual taxes due.
Right, we're talking about when it has to come out and what the net result is for you.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and so in an IRA, we don't have to have anything withheld if we don't want to.
Right.
And if I want to have taxes withheld, I can have it withheld for the federal level and the state level. And so it just makes it a little bit more flexible.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, you get to make that decision because you know your situation. Your employer doesn't, or the 401k provider doesn't know your specific situation. They're going to just follow the rules and the law, right? It's all about they don't want to be liable for that tax that they should have withheld.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about the next prison bar, if you will, which is the 10% early withdrawal penalty. And the IRS does allow some exceptions to that penalty. So walk us through how this penalty is assessed between 401ks and IRAs.
Yeah, basically, to set the stage, if you're under 59.5, there could be a 10% penalty. Once you're over 59.5, that for the most part goes away. There's still some restrictions on accessing your money for qualified withdrawals or distributions from certain types of accounts like IRAs or Roth IRAs specifically, but there's 21 of these exceptions, okay? 11 of them apply to both plans, things like death, disability, medical expenses. But here's where most folks get burned. 3 exceptions apply to IRAs only: higher education expense for you, your spouse, your kids, or grandkids, and a first-time home purchase up to $10,000. So in my early example with McGovern versus Commissioner, he was applying an IRA-only withdrawal exception to the 10% penalty to a 401k world, because I said these are 2 different worlds, to a 401k world withdrawal situation. That is not allowed. 7 exceptions are 401k only, but I think they're less impactful than the ones in the IRA, because it's things like age 55. Most people aren't retiring at 55, but that's good to know. Age 50 or 25 years for public safety employees, 457 plans, actually governmental 457 plans. So like some of the clients we work with work for the University of Nebraska. Their 457 is a governmental plan. You could retire at 52 and start taking money out, and there wouldn't be a 10% penalty because it's a 457B governmental plan. Long-term care exception just got added, I think, this year. Phased federal retirement. Quadros would be in case of divorce. The point is, the 3 that I talked about that are IRA only, if you take it from a 401k, you're going to owe that penalty, even if you use the money for that exact option. That's what McGovern did. And we'll talk about in segment 3 that it's actually the reason why some folks keep money in their 401k, at least temporarily, is the top one on the far right that you can see on your screen is maybe they're going to change jobs. They retire from their current position and then they're going to work part-time, but they're only 56 years old or 57 years old. Jeremy will hit this in segment 3. There are some reasons that you keep it in the 401k, but flexibility and optionality that we've talked about thus far isn't one of them.
Right. Well, as we wrap up this part of the discussion, any other real-world scenarios that you want to highlight?
Got one more. Again, this came from the meeting recently. This is my favorite. It's Keith Lamar Jones was the gentleman's name. And this is from 2005. Now, again, I'm intentionally doing these because Keith, again, he was not just like a layperson, so to speak. He was an accountant at Deloitte. He left the firm to enroll in a PhD program, and he pulled $30,369 out of his 401k. He used the money for tuition and a first-time home purchase. Both, under the IRA rules, would have been valid for 10% exceptions. He filed his taxes thinking he was in the clear. IRS came knocking and said, you owe 10%. He said, what? No, I don't. There's really no difference between a 401k. Again, it's a matter of form. The tax court said, no, it's not. He owed every penny of the penalty. And here's the kicker that really sticks with me. If he had simply rolled the money to an IRA first, right, because he had separated from service, he had terminated his employment, he had nothing with stopping him from rolling that money over, he could have rolled it to an IRA, then taken the withdrawal, he would have been in the clear. But instead, he messed up the order of operations. And again, this is why it takes a guide, like a veteran who has landed the plane before. Mm-hmm. The thing that is different between maybe us and maybe some of the firms that other folks have met with in the past is when you come into our office, we're not going to try to sell you on returns or promises of beating the market or trying to be some hero stock picker. Instead, we're going to focus on what actually matters, and that's navigating you to and through retirement, being that trusted ally in your corner that holds the lamp, that lights the path that your feet can walk on, that avoids these tax landmines, these penalties, taxes, fees, and surcharges, so you get to your destination intact, in one piece, as efficiently as possible, so you can focus on what truly matters. We're looking forward to seeing you soon when you give us a call. We'll be back, right?
Yes, we will. Tim, Jeremy, thank you so much. I'm excited for more folks to connect with you. Again, that number to call to schedule your complimentary written review is there for you on the bottom of your screen, 866-256-7778. Stay with us. When we come back, we are going to get into one of the biggest differences, which is what happens to these accounts once you pass away. Stay with us to hear about that right after this.
As Americans, we strive for better. From a better house to a better career, to a better life for our children and grandchildren. Better has become the American way. When it comes to your retirement, what does better mean to you? Does it mean more income, a flexible lifestyle, better solutions? A better retirement begins with a financial plan. To get your complimentary written financial plan, call the number you see here. You only retire once. This is your opportunity to plan for better.
Welcome back to the Retirement Compass, where today we've been detailing a lot of the key differences between having a 401k and having an IRA. Before we talk about what happens once you're no longer here to those accounts, I know that you guys want to touch on charitable giving, specifically QCDs, those qualified charitable distributions. So how do those differences work?
So we have a slide for that as well, but the QCDs are, they're a great tool to use because it's of how it works. So if you're 70 and a half in 2026, you can actually give up to $111,000 per person directly from your retirement account to a qualified charity. Now the key is it has to go directly from your account to the charity. You don't want that check sent to you first and then to the charity because that will create a taxable event. Mm-hmm. The key is, though, it's not a deduction. It's better than a deduction because it never gets added into your taxable income. So it's a great tool to use. It keeps your Medicare premiums lower, less tax on your Social Security, and it keeps you in that lower tax brackets on all of the other income that you have. So it's a great tool to use.
It preserves the additional standard deduction for folks because so much is that line, that above or below the line. If you itemize, that's going below the line. So your AGI is, that distribution you took has already been added to your AGI. But here's the point of this slide. Look at the bottom right.
They're
Can
not
you
allowed.
do a QCD from a 401k?
No.
You cannot.
Do I have people tell me, yes, I can? All the time. But no, I promise you, the rules, it does not work that way. It is an IRA specific, an IRA only technique.
Yeah. Well, now let's talk about inheriting these accounts, because this is another area where folks get tripped up, and a lot of people assume that as long as the beneficiary name is listed, that's who's going to get that money. But is that true for both 401ks and IRAs?
No. And so the simple answer is no. So we do have a slide for that. If you want to pull that up, who inherits the money. So it's a great question. It's something that I think is a lot of people miss when they're doing this type of planning. So inside an IRA, you name whoever you want, your children, grandchildren, potentially a charity or a trust. It's your call. You're in control of that. Inside a 401k, federal law says your spouse is the automatic beneficiary. And so it doesn't matter what's written on your beneficiary form. If you want to name anyone else, even your own children, your spouse must sign a notarized waiver. And so no waiver of the beneficiary form means nothing, the spouse wins. And this isn't theoretical. There's a famous case about this. And if we want to pull up the next slide, we can talk about Cajun Industries versus Robert Kidder. So Cajun Industries, this is another good example of beneficiary forms and just not understanding the rules and regulations. A man named Leonard had a 401k plan. His first wife passed away, and he updated his beneficiary form, naming his 3 children. Sometime later, Leonard remarried a woman named Beth. He never had Beth sign a waiver of spousal rights. 6 weeks after the wedding, Leonard passed away. Unexpectedly, the 3 children who were named on the form said the form, they had the form and they knew what it was controlling. So the court ruled that Beth gets everything. The children who were named beneficiaries did not get anything. And so inside of 401k, ERISA writes the rules. Inside an IRA, you do. And that's the key difference.
Yes, and this is why folks need to understand this. This is why you sit down with people when you first meet with them, go over their account, see how things are titled. Beneficiary designations, so important to make sure those are up to date. One last one, I know we need to talk about this. RMDs, required minimum distributions, because they work differently inside these 2 accounts.
Absolutely. Here's what I would tell all of our viewers today. As you head into retirement, you're entering a new phase, a phase that you don't have to go alone. You switch from having maybe focused on what the market's doing and equity market risk to what I call rules risk and legislative risk. This slide illustrates exactly my point, because with IRAs, you can use what's called the aggregation rule. And you can take money out if you have 3 IRAs and you have required minimum distributions, which kick in at age 73 to 75, you can combine them all together. 401ks do not allow you to do that. You have to take a separate RMD from each 401k, and you cannot take your 401k RMD from your IRA. Last year I had somebody try to do that, and they ended up having to take a lot more money. Did they have an advisor? Yes. Did they give them incorrect advice? Yes. So here's what I'd leave you with. If you have 401ks and they're spread out and they feel like they're all playing to their own sheet of music and you're really not sure how it works as a coordinated plan, that would absolutely be a reason you'd want to give our team a call today, visit with one of our experienced advisors, and let's get you everything playing on the same sheet of music so it sounds harmonious and beautiful and you focus on the things that are important to you.
Wonderful. Tim, Jeremy, thank you so much. And thank you for watching. 866-256-7778 is the number to call, or you're welcome to scan that QR code. That will get you connected as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time here on the Retirement Compass.